Let's discuss this with Peter Zalmayev, the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, and you're near Kyiv right now. Peter, thank you very much for taking the time. Hearing Sergei Lavrov saying that they did not attack Ukraine, and also making outlandish statements in terms of the justification of targeting a maternity hospital. It kind of goes to show that there's clearly no sense of responsibility, firstly, taken, but also, secondly, just how far they're willing to go in terms of their aggression to try and weaken Ukraine.
Well, these are all ominous signs. What we heard from Mr. Lavrov at that press conference is, makes George Orwell twist and turn in his coffin. Russia under Vladimir Putin has become a veritable empire of lies. They will not even acknowledge the fact of the invasion against Ukraine. So their demands continue to be, during these peace talks, continue to be completely unacceptable to Ukraine. I think what it looks like is that they're going through this charade of peace talks in order to present themselves as the peacemaker. Because Russia, according to Russians, is waging a war of defense. They don't even call it a war; it's a special operation for them. The demands that they have proposed, such as denazification of Ukraine, which is a very an overbroad term and is quite frankly ridiculous, really means a capitulation of Ukraine through other means. And so this does send a quite worrisome signal for the days to come that Vladimir Putin may, have calculated that escalation, an increase in escalation may be the way to go.
So, Peter, I'm trying to get a sense, Peter, in terms of where to from here in terms of negotiations and discussions, because, firstly and most urgently is to try and create humanitarian corridors, which we know are often death traps over the past few days, which is worrying. The second part is Russia says, we've got three demands. We're not going to, push. We're not going to fall back on any of these demands, specifically on Ukraine, saying that they should, of course, have no other affiliation and be independent states. Who's going to have to make a concession here, and how quickly can that happen? Do you think? Do you think we're on the path to try and figuring out a route forward in terms of the solution? Are we still going to be talking about humanitarian corridors as this war is going to rage on?
I think Vladimir Putin still thinks that continuing to soften up, to use this euphemism, Ukraine's defenders and Ukraine's civilians is the way to win this war. He is looking for ways to declare a victory of some sort. He's probably realized by now that since Ukrainians have put up a much stiffer resistance than he expected, that he pretty much lost the war as he thought it would proceed. He expected the Russian soldiers to be greeted with open arms and with flowers. It didn't happen. Ukraine is as consolidated and as united against the enemy as ever, as anyone could imagine was possible. So he's going to be continuing escalating, as I said. And I think by this tactic of terrorizing the population, of laying siege to the whole city of Mariupol, of 200,000 people who are essentially hostages right now. I have my relatives and my friends from among those people who are scouring now in these basements without water or food or power for over a week now. So he's actually causing this massive outflow of people to create a massive humanitarian catastrophe for Europe in order for the Europeans to start exerting pressure on Zelensky to compromise. So Ukrainians are willing to compromise. They are willing to consider the neutrality status. But once again, the way Russians have phrased their demands is completely unacceptable and mean capitulation of the country and essentially losing its sovereignty and independence.
Peter, you mentioning those stark realities in Mariupol, it really it's absolutely horrific to think about it. How do you then reconcile the West's response using sanctions to squeeze Putin with the urgency and the emergencies that are occurring on the ground? Clearly, more needs to be done to try and get resources to people. And we're talking about people running out of food and water. Something surely can be done to alleviate some of that pressure.
Well, I mean, Western partners are doing all they can. They've already woken up to the reality that the fight in Ukraine is a fight for their liberal democracies, for civilization at large. It is logistically very difficult to get that food to them. It is Vladimir Putin's ultimate decision if he lets or not. But he's already shown that he is willing to contemplate a Chechenization of the conflict, which means turning Kiev, turning Kharkiv, these other Ukrainian cities into Grozny. And you remember what happened in Grozny 20 years ago, or Aleppo in Syria. That's the way Russians conduct their, their war, the most in the dirtiest way imaginable. It's a do or die moment for Vladimir Putin. He considers his whole presidency is riding on Ukraine right now.
Peter, the words of Zelensky keep ringing in my mind when he was speaking to the UN Security Council, and he said, "Don't make the same mistakes as 2014." And I think back to some of those words, that narrative over the past few weeks before this happened, and I wonder what opportunities might have been missed to try and avert this situation. Were you part of the view that this wasn't really a possibility? Were you as shocked as most people?
Yes, 2014 was a year of missed opportunities as far as sanctions and the kind of sanctions that were slapped on Russia and the way they were pretty much allowed to lapse. Russia found a workaround around those sanctions, and they were never taken seriously at the end of the day. Western companies came back to Russia. Some even tried to work in the Crimea, the occupied Crimea. So no one really took the situation seriously. No one really thought Vladimir Putin would be as dangerous and suicidal, frankly, as he became. And, the very idea that the West and NATO would encourage Ukrainians to aspire for NATO membership, but not give it to them under some pretense of, well, you guys have to continue fighting corruption. There's all these other check marks you have to put. Ultimately, it's not just Ukraine. It's a lot of it is in NATO responsibility, and I think the West is now recognizing this historical responsibility. They recognize that the fate of Ukraine is their own legitimacy.
Peter Zalmayev, stay safe. Thank you very much for your insights, and wishing you all the best in these difficult times, to you and your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you.